Hello and welcome everyone to DRJ's webinar series. I am Bob Arnold, President here at Disaster Cover Journal. Today's sponsor is Recovery Point, and today's topic is Ransomware Readiness, Steps and Solutions to Ensure Data Recoverability. Before we get started, I want to review a couple housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. This recording will be shared with everyone tomorrow via an automated email. Attendees are also in a listen-only mode. If you'd like to ask any questions, please use the question panel you will locate on the right-hand side of your screen. We're going to get to as many of these questions as possible at the end of the session. And now back to today's session on ransomware readiness. Our presenters today are Jeff Judy and Scott Williams. Jeff has more than 2 decades of experience in system architecture and administration with a particular focus on virtualized solutions. He designed, built, and deployed Recovery Point's cloud environments and has extensive experience with a broad range of storage replication and backup technologies. He also has experience deploying new data centers and leading systems engineering teams. He's a VMware certified professional. As Recovery Point's top security and compliance leader, Scott does more than ensure that companies become stronger through today's threat landscape. He also helps to grow the organization's strongest capabilities internally and externally as a value creator, stemming from challenges faced in the cybersecurity today. He continues to manage risk for the entire organization, engages today's latest threats with his growing team and operational leadership. With no further introduction, I'd like to now welcome and turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to the DRJ for hosting us today. Today, we're here to present to you on ransomware readiness, steps and solutions to ensure data recoverability. And ransomware attacks are probably the #1 disaster recovery event today. They're ever-present threats in the digital landscape, and it's critical for organizations to have a robust recovery strategy in place. The key to mitigating damage and ensuring business continuity lies in your organization's ability to recover critical data quickly and effectively. So Scott and I are going to get into it today. We're going to take you through 3 levels of what you can achieve, an intermediate, middle tier, and then an advanced tactics. So again, I'm Jeff, and I'm joined by Scott Williams there, our Chief Security Information Officer. How you doing,
Hello.
Scott?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So the webinar is designed to provide you with a clear roadmap for strengthening your data recoverability posture at every level. It's whether your organization is just starting out in ransomware in your preparedness journey, or you're looking to enhance your existing strategies. So we're going to give you practical insights and actionable steps to ensure your data is always protected and recoverable. We, Recovery Point Systems, we are a pure play provider of end-to-end cyber resiliency and disaster recovery solutions. And our mission is to protect the performance of your business by delivering exceptional recovery services. So we strive to ensure our clients are protected and able to recover from any disaster. We own and operate our own Tier 3 Uptime Institute certified data centers, and we support a wide range of technologies from IBM mainframe, PowerI, AIX, x86, virtual physical, and hybrid cloud solutions. So we offer an assisted disaster recovery, fully managed recovery services, and co-location services as well. Scott, it's often said, it's not if, it's not even when, but it's more so how often will a company be breached. And so we like to set a baseline here, right around the risks are real.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we see them every day, coming through the news, through threat intel constantly. The risks here, they're basically very, very real. And again, when you look at the numbers here, 73% of companies worldwide have paid ransom to recover data. A lot of the data was not necessarily recovered per se, and to recover that data took much more time than it did when it was encrypted. The average cost of a data breach is around 9.4 million. Typically, you'll see the base floors for cyber insurance around 5 million for most companies and beyond. And then, of course, 93% of these attacks mainly target your backup platforms. So it makes it much more difficult if you don't have those platforms in place and resilient. So,
Right.
yeah,
But underneath that, the tip of the iceberg there's other things, right? You've got increased insurance premiums,
absolutely.
brand damage, loss of productivity, employee burnout, even loss of job security. So there's things that in the headlines you see the numbers, but there's really if you look below the surface, there's additional damage to your company that there's really can be sustained and is long term.
And a
So
lot
it
of
impacts
this,
your performance.
yeah. Oh, sorry. And a lot of these things here are also, preemptive measures that you have to take to really handle these types of loss of value to the organization. So trying to justify this from a budgeting standpoint is very difficult as well. You have to basically look and focus more or less from a preemptive standpoint.
All right. So Scott, in what disaster recovery plan do you have a step that says wait until the middle of a ransomware attack to restore from a backup for the first time ever?
No, 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 no. Usually you have that
Done.
plan way ahead, way ahead before
Yeah.
things happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like
So,
trying to put out the fire, and then you're just like, let's go get some water. Right.
so it says effective cyber resiliency requires proactive measures before a breach, not reactive actions during it. It's so simple, but we're working with clients at all different varying levels and degrees of cyber resiliency planning. And so, a lot of times things that seem simple really are not fully thought out. And when that attack occurs, you at that point fully realize that you're not prepared to be able to recover from such a cyberware attack.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I like to just show that there's a difference between traditional and ransomware recovery, and that's really what the focus is today. It's a big mistake to presume that you can recover based on the traditional disaster recovery plan, and or even the fact that you might be able to recover from an hour ago or the day before. When you get into a ransomware recovery situation, you have to deal with things like dwell time. How long has that attacker been lurking in your network? It could be for weeks or even months. Data encryption. So if you have a successful ransomware attack, they've gained root access to your systems and encrypted all of your company's data. That could be like the nuclear option there. If they've gotten deep into your network and they're able to encrypt everything, and you're down hard. Even including your backups. What do? With a ransomware attack, they apply time-sensitive extortion tactics. So you don't have a lot of time. They may have partially encrypted your environment and just trying to hold you ransom before they encrypt everything. So and they have double extortion tactics. So they may have exfiltrated data, and they're like, you have to pay me, or I'm going to release that data out into the wild. And then, of course, if when you're trying to do a recovery, if the threat's not entirely identified and removed, those systems that you've recovered may still be vulnerable. So what do? You're going to need some type of multi-stream recovery efforts. You're going to need a communication plan to all the stakeholders, to management, law enforcement, and to the public. So there's just a multitude of different things that have to happen during a ransomware attack and in a recovery situation versus a traditional approach.
Yeah, and when we look at this from an anatomy of an attack perspective, this is basically what happens. Typically, you'll see from day zero, the attackers will gain access. They'll stick around for a while, what's known as like dwell time, and just kind of hang out as much as they can without being detected. And then shortly thereafter, the data is becoming encrypted. They try to look at your backups and erase them and snapshots and things like that, and try to go back as far as they can. And then they start looking at some data exfiltration as well. But then the data gets encrypted and they demand payment. You may get a nice little letter saying that systems have been owned. You get a ransomware letter demanding to pay a ransom within a certain amount of time, a short amount of time typically, and threat to expose your company to the dark web and basically expose precious data that could be intrinsically valuable to your organization. And then, typically the next as things start to flow, you want to start doing recovery. It says the next day, but typically it takes days upon weeks. And then when you look at weeks, typically you look at what is the average time for recovery. Usually the average time that we've been seeing is around 55 to 60 days. And when you look at that number, that's 15% of the year, right? So the 15% of the year, that's 15% of your revenue that could be affected during that time frame. So that's probably the number that you want to focus on for the amount of money you would probably want to get for a cyber insurance policy. So an example of that would be if you're a $100 million company, you may want to have at least a $15 million base for your insurance needs for cyber and other types of incidents that may require recoverability as well. And again, realizing that it takes months, lateral movement starts going through, and you look at how they kind of hang out, from that perspective, and basically using tools living off the land is what it's called,
Mm-hmm.
and they just kind of go
Yep.
through and just obliterate most systems and platforms if they can get to them, and just keep going. And while you're still trying to recover, if they're still there, sometimes you may even go beyond, or not even go beyond the dwell time, right? Typically it's 5 days. So if you look at the dwell time beyond that, then you're looking at, beyond maybe 14 days. Typically 30 days is probably a good enough, safe number to be aware what's going on, especially if you're using a endpoint detection platform or managed detection, and basically have that response capability in place as well for an MDR EDR, and go from there. And then what will typically happen is, as you're trying to recover, you may have to recover multiple instances, one for forensics, one for other things to get operations up and running, and one for your critical applications that have to be up and ready to go.
That's right. Yeah, it's not a clean process. Hey, did you say it was 55 days to recover?
Typically, it's 55 days to get your business operations, to get your business
Business operations.
continuity back in
Yeah,
place. Yeah, yeah. Recovery can take a lot less time, but then all the other stuff comes into play, right? So you're still in a marginal state for at least 55 days on average, is what
yep,
the numbers are showing.
yep. So
And
if you partner with Recovery Point, we're going to drastically improve that recovery time objective for you.
absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks. So we're going to dive in deep on the building blocks basically for ensuring that your data recoverability and business continuity. We're going to provide you a framework, um, from a foundational perspective all the way to some advanced tactics. What does that really look like? Um, the foundation is really it starts with backups and knowing where your critical data sets live and prioritizing them. And then you're going to go into an intermediate area. You may already have those foundational pieces. You have backups, but you don't have a real good BCDR plan, business continuity disaster recovery plan. You don't have very successful testing, things like that. And then you get into the more advanced techniques when you start to have a good plan, have good inventory sets. You want to be able to start to automate those processes, cycle through them, because that's where you really get good at being able to recover, have the confidence, your team has that confidence that you can recover from basically any type of event. So we're going to dive into foundational strategies. These components, they're foundational to secure and make your data resilient from every step of the way. And each one of these steps that we showed builds on the previous one to create a robust defense strategy for your company. When you look at data inventory, you got to know where your critical data sets live. Make sure that they're being backed up at the minimum. You really, these days, you must have immutability on your data sets. Make sure that those backups can't be deleted. They can't be altered or encrypted in any fashion. And of course, air gap. Get a copy offsite somewhere where it's in a safe, it's locked up away, and it can't be touched and can't be reached by bad actors. So what does data inventory and prioritization look like? Scott, do you want to step us through the pyramid here? Because we like to blend solutions really with clients.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So typically, when you look at, the core infrastructure in your databases, you want to look at your applications that are going to continue to operate and have the business function accordingly. You're looking at operations for revenue-based applications. So if your backend systems are offline for batch processing or what have you, if it's not really tied to revenue, typically your tier zero is where you really want to focus heavily in on and really understand, what is data inventory versus your typical like asset inventory or things like that. It's more or less understanding where your critical data resides and making sure that you can access it as soon as possible in the midst of an event, a ransomware attack or what have you, and get that back online and maintain a high level of protection of those backups as well, and go on from there. And then, of course, with tier one, the mission critical applications, you're looking at, a lot of different things there. And, as far as, data replication and change block tracking, and all those things kind of come into play. So those are the major areas you really want to get a better understanding on. You want to be able to see it and solve it, essentially. And you should be able to understand every data type inventory application that ties back to the organization as a whole, that will allow you to continue to function even during these tough times, and have a plan in place to do that. And of course, with the other things, and Jeff, you can probably speak to like the VM replications and things like that as well, on the other tier, like tier two and tier three. Uh, those are some key areas as well.
I would say that there's really two things that if you don't take time to do inventory and prioritize, two things that will come from not doing that would be you're going to wind up spending way too much money protecting non-critical systems. If you're like, all right, let's just replicate everything. Well, that's going to be a high dollar cost to try to replicate everything when, maybe your dev and QA could really be restored at a later time and just sit on backups. And the other side of that coin is you've missed critical data sets that weren't included in properly scoped, and those get encrypted, and you have no backups, you have no replication because you didn't know about them. And then what happens? You're basically left with paying the ransom to hopefully that decryption key restores your data sets.
Absolutely. Yeah, and this pyramid is great to show to like a board or to an executive team and kind of show them the almost like the dollar amounts essentially, because as you go up the pyramid, it gets much more expensive. Absolutely, yes. But the risk appetite also gets tighter. So your organization has to understand risk appetite versus costs. And this is a really good way to illustrate the foundation of how you build out your data inventory and prioritize accordingly.
Yep. So then you get into immutability. This is table stakes. We talk about this with many clients. You must have immutability. There's just no option not to have it. But the questions we field around backups and dwell time with attackers is like, is 14 days enough retention, or what is best practice for how much should I retain in an immutable state? And I hate to say it depends, but it really does depend on what is the critical set of data that you need that's important to your business. Can your business withstand 2 weeks of data loss and still, restore from 2 weeks ago and keep moving forward with operations? So you must have at least that amount. And then of course there's compliance issues that you need to maybe maintain copies of data sets for 7 years for some clients. But
Absolutely.
immutability is essential for data integrity and for rapid recovery. And then of course for cyber resilience as well, right? I mean, you
Yes.
have to have that copy. Okay. And then finally, in the foundational level here, this is a statement we make and repeat throughout across the board for all clients. But 3-2-1-1-0, and what that breaks down to is you must have 3 copies of data, keep them on 2 different media sets, keep one of those data sets off site, and then keep it air gapped. Air gapped doesn't necessarily have to be a tape in a vault offline somewhere, although that's great. Write it on a write once, read many tape, and put it in a vault. But immutability is out there today, and it's been out there for many years now, and it's a really good way to be able to offload your data out to, say, an object storage solution somewhere. We offer that too in our data center, and that's immutable. So most object storage solutions have object locking so that the data sets can't be deleted, they can't be altered. And then that zero is really key. It's really, like we said before, you need to test that you can recover from these backup sets. You don't want to wait till you've been attacked by a ransomware event, and then you pull that backup out and say, okay, let's see for the first time if it's going to work. So we take you into intermediate tactics: inventory management, BCDR planning, testing, validation, and clean rooms. Scott, one thing I like to see, and I see clients doing more of, is more of a tabletop cybersecurity testing. So more of an incident response pressure test. Make sure
Absolutely.
that those types of scenarios are planned out for. It's not just traditional, I've lost power in my data center or fire or flood or whatnot, but systems are down and everything's encrypted. You have no communications, you have no authentication. Uh, and the only thing you may have is like a way to restore from that offline immutable backup. But where do you
Absolutely.
restore into? Where do you recover into? You were talking about this a few minutes ago, like being able to recover those backups and maybe even do a multi-stream recovery process. You need a alternate location. So if you come to Recovery Point into our data centers, we can provide a clean room that's isolated, and we have the hardware and the capabilities to bring that infrastructure to life for you, so that you have a place to do things like forensics analysis.
Absolutely. Plus, augmentation of staff is huge. When it comes to stuff like this, having a team that can be
That's right.
dedicated to just handle it, take care of it, and just run with it is an optimal solution to have. And when you look at inventory management also includes third-party systems and platforms that you may not be readily aware of, especially during your pressure test during your tabletop. That then ties directly into your business continuity and your disaster recovery planning as well. So when you go through that testing, you test your vendors. Call them up, put out a ticket, see how fast their response times are on a weekend, or
Oh
on a
yeah.
3-day holiday. It's really interesting to see what resources are available at what times as well. And if you plan accordingly, you'll see that, because threat actors don't take days off, right? They like to pick holidays. They love them. So
Yeah, they
yeah,
love it when you're asleep, you're offline, not looking at the console.
right,
Um,
absolutely.
and we said before, they don't wait for budget cycles either. They they're not waiting
Right,
for you to.
don't care.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're ready to attack whenever.
yeah.
Okay, so what is a clean room? The clean rooms are especially critical for verifying that your backups are clean, that you can do a full recovery. And that's not just at the time of a true event, but running through testing scenarios. And it's also for analysis. So um, when you call and you're testing your vendors, I wouldn't even call us a vendor. We are a partner in that
Absolutely.
we're doing our best to make sure that you're recoverable. We're not just a vendor that you call for a support call in the middle of the night, but we're trying to make sure that your DR plan is going to be successful, um, and that you have the right equipment to meet the needs to run those applications, things like that. So, to that end, you need partnerships. You need a disaster recovery service provider, but you also need an incident response vendor that can handle the forensics analysis for you.
Right. Yeah, and that's huge today in the market. A lot of companies will go out. They'll find like a backup as a service platform. They'll swipe and go, make it transactional, or they'll have a PS professional services team come out and kind of build out their backup strategy or what have you, and then they go away, and then you're left with your team to handle a lot of these critical operations. If the
Yeah.
if the regulatory agencies come and take your equipment, that might be a problem. But if you have an off-site where you can actually do these types of forensics and other things and still be able to function is key. So those are some of the things you want to think about whenever you're really planning for a long-term strategy with a strategic partner, as opposed to going from either like cloud to cloud or region to region or cloud to data center. But the data center that you
Yep.
go to should be your strategic partner that's involved as well. And we own our own data centers. So.
And clients that, it can be expensive to make an investment into that kind of infrastructure. So you don't have to make that investment with us. We have the infrastructure on standby, and we can deploy that from our pool of resources.
Absolutely.
Um,
I can
and
say
when you
that.
get into a true event, it's important to know what to recover per instance. And that instance is clean, that you're not bringing something back into production that's still infected. So recovery point objectives are critical. So say if you have to go back on a specific ERP database, if you have to go back 3 months on that database, then you have to shut down the business, right? It's not viable. You lost too much data. So people want to know what systems were infected and what's the closest point I can recover to, and how, I mean, it's a bit of a pressure situation, and you're trying to deliver that information to executives, to management. How much data have I lost? How far back do you have to go before we can bring systems back online? So it's very important to know that information.
Absolutely.
Um,
Communication and transparency is key too, because then as the team evolves through this process, we can basically say, okay, this is what's happening at this point in time, and this is where we are, and you can relay that right directly to your leadership teams who are involved in the event.
yeah. And think about this situation. You're saying it's 55 plus days to recover. So you're with us. We can recover you in, say, 24 hours or 48 hours, depending on how bad it is. But you've got teams working around the clock. You've gone 24 hours recovering systems. Things are looking good, but it's dangerous to recover the wrong stuff. And so if you don't check those systems that you're putting back into prod, it can reinfect the whole system and you're starting all over again. So
Yeah.
this is very critical. All right.
We,
Yeah. So another component is testing and validation. It just kind of fits right along into your clean room. So you have the hardware, you've got the isolated environment, but what's your plan look like? You know, if you're not doing regular testing, you are out of date. All right. So we got clients that test once a year. That's great. They're checking the box. They've tested once a year, but by the 11th month, I guarantee that they are not actually able to recover. Too much has changed in a year that you're going to have some major gaps in your plan. Technology's changed. Systems get decommissioned, new systems put in place. All sorts of things happen throughout the course of a year. So it's important to regularly test. This slide just kind of shows you what it kind of looks like, right? Like Scott, like having a Polaroid camera?
yes. Yeah.
You just take that picture in time, it pops out of the camera. It's an instant snapshot of that, day, point in time,
Yes.
whatever picture you were taking. And that's great. It's one time a year. You've got that picture, but like I said, 12 months go by, you have big gaps in your disaster recovery plan. And
Absolutely.
the risk factor is going to go up. So as those days stack between your tests, risks go up. How do you minimize that? How do you reduce that risk factor and find those gaps in your DR plan? There's all sorts of things that need to happen, like change control processes up front in your operational ticketing system and procedures. Like that's a good way to kind of make sure that whatever's done in prod gets reflected in DR. Another way is to actually run through your test cycles faster, more frequently. It doesn't have to be the entire set of infrastructure. Do micro tests, different platforms, and throw different scenarios in there, but make sure that you're testing more frequently.
Absolutely. Yeah. Different tiers at different times. Just stagger them if you have to, and really really build on that. And then as you start to get into the momentum, it becomes a cadence and it becomes habit, which is really good.
Yeah. And I know there's people out there that are like, I don't have time for this. I can barely keep up with the production workload that's going on. So, there's ways that we're going to show you here in the more advanced tactics on how you can get there.
Yeah, so business continuity and DR planning, right? This is key to any organization, large, small, especially if you're dealing with sensitive data. It could be a law firm, it could be a covered entity as a hospital, it could be an insurance company, what have you. But basically, the DR plan is one of the core pieces or core components of business continuity, right? Typically, they go hand in hand. You typically hear one with the other on most common platforms. And when you rehearse this and you play it out, even like a ransomware incident, you kind of walk through with a cross-functional team to get a better understanding of communications between the teams and realization of what's going on, and looking at how you can define these things to help reduce downtime and overall impact of the organization. And you do this, you do want to set your RPOs and RTOs essentially, right? Your recovery point objectives and your recovery time objectives, and get those in place. And then as you start to kind of squeeze them down, yes, it seems like it's going to be more time and more expense, right? But when you look at that squeeze versus the risk appetite, and you look at the risk scenarios around that, then you can start tying in more data points for performance-driven metrics around that will help you do other things like identification of your members involved and those responsibilities and who does what. And being able to do that is key. And of course, in order to really justify those tight guidelines is through business impact analysis as well. Once you have all of that in place and you understand what tiers go where from the business impact analysis, you document the plan, and then you have to document the plan in a place that you can get to from anywhere at any time, or vault it if you want to put it into a vault, which we do have vaults, by the way, and test it regularly.
Yep.
And like we were mentioning in the previous slide, Jeff, I mean, you were talking about go faster and or not faster, but necessarily, but basically
Increase the frequency. Yeah.
increase the frequency. Exactly. Yeah. So that's the key there, and it just becomes a cadence once again. So it's a good thing to have, very good thing to have in place and test it, not just written down as a checkbox. When you look at inventory management here, you're mapping your critical systems. You're bringing things together. The goal here is to see it and solve it, right? Get a better understanding of what is going on in your inventory. Have someone who can be dedicated typically to inventory, or someone that you can be held accountable in your environment, or with your strategic partner. Have them do the inventory for you and map out these critical systems and dependencies across the board, and look at what's crucial and around operations, and what are the dependencies, right? What comes up first? Is it your Active Directory? Is it your database servers, your web servers, things like that, email, what have you, if you're still using on-prem email, but or even Office 365 and things like that you have to be aware of to maintain or resume identity if identity gets compromised and things like that. And so those dependencies come into play across the board. And then continually, when you look at this, keeping track of new systems, I mean, Jeff, how often do you see change in your typical environments? Is it constant? Is there like a percentage? Is it like 50% over the year?
It's constant. Yeah. There's,
Yeah.
it's hard to put a number on it, but there's one thing is guaranteed 100% is that there's always going to be some change out there.
Good point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, continuous update process, tracking that inventory management, that's beyond just knowing where your data sets live. I mean, the systems have to run the applications. So you need to know what systems are on the wire.
Yeah.
And how critical what gets brought up first, second, and third. What can you stand to wait a few days or a week on? Helps you with in the ransomware negotiations. There may be some portion of your systems that are not recoverable for whatever reason, and you have to negotiate, but it's not everything. They may want payment for the entire set of infrastructure, but that you can recover 90%. There's just 10% you need to pay for.
Right. And it's much easier to assess that number here now quickly than it would be in the midst of an attack.
Thanks, Scott. So advanced techniques. This is where we could take you to the next level for recovery, disaster recovery, ransomware recovery. It's like it says here, it's not just to make you effective but efficient as well. It's going to minimize the recovery time objective. Hopefully, we can minimize the data loss recovery point objective as well by automating and runbook management. So some things I like to say around, mostly around enterprise clients. There's a lot of different teams, a lot of different moving parts, so does your DR plan live up to expectations? I mean, you might have a team US based, you might have a team in India, you might have, and you might have multiple platforms that you're dealing with in project management and managers, so you have a cyber attack. You initiate your response plan. Oh no, email is down. Where's the phone list? I can't find the phone list. The network team decides to kill the network. Somebody was a little gung-ho and just said, let's pull the plug. But the Commvault team's like, we need to restore backups. Please plug the network back in. The Linux team's like, I need a new batch of physical servers to restore my application sets, but you don't have any more hardware to give them. Executives, they now need hourly status updates. All that ransomware note floats in, it's demanding payment, or the entire network will be encrypted. Your Active Directory team decides, let's shut down all authentication because it's been compromised. We don't know how bad it is. Meanwhile, the VMware team's trying to restore an Active Directory snapshot, but they didn't know you were shutting down Active Directory because it's compromised. And then finally, you're like, I need to restore all of my VMs, but how far back in time do I go? Does my Oracle database in my mainframe need to be rolled back as well? Maybe those systems were not impacted. Maybe it's just all x86. But there's synchronization between a database, log file, and application system, mainframe systems as well. So maybe even though they weren't impacted, you still have to roll the entire set back to the day before, 2 days, a week before. How do you herd the cats? How do you put all that together? That's where we come in. We offer automated, reliable recovery with managed resiliency. So, our teams are able to take a look at your infrastructure, your critical sets of data, applications, help you put that disaster recovery plan together, and then build automation behind the scenes for the recovery processes. It can be anything from just powering systems on to restoring entire networks to bringing those applications back to life. The automation can be applied across the board to do that. So how does managed resiliency do that? We offer it in 2 different flavors, really. It's at the system level, where we can recover just all of your systems back and make sure that they're connected back to the network. We call it, usually it's a DR bubble network is how we like to describe it. It's back on the DR side, still production configurations, but it's over on the DR side. So maybe there's some type of testing usually that's happening, and you don't want a DR test, any of those systems being able to talk back to the production side. And then again, we'll take you through application level recovery as well. We can restore SQL, we can restore Active Directory systems, we can restore Oracle databases, and up the chain through different applications.
That's
Some
a
of the
huge
key
value right there. Yeah, huge value.
Yeah, it is, because like I said, this is a partnership. We're not just a vendor. We're looking after your best interest to make sure that you're recoverable. And this is just one of the ways that we can help you get there. So automation and orchestration is really key to be able to scale and create those efficiencies and find the gaps in your DR plan quickly. We also offer or have a dashboard visibility view. So like when you're in the middle of something, you need to see what state of recovery are you in. So there's a dashboard that we can show you, like percentage-wise, what's been recovered, what's left to do, and generate those hourly reports that the executives might want to see, for status reports. And then we can get into things like health monitoring, drift management that really happen throughout the year. So we can keep track of, are you meeting your RPOs? Are you meeting your RTOs? Has something changed in your environment that needs to be reflected in disaster recovery that's not there anymore? So things like that we can take care of for you. But Scott, our approach to cyber resiliency, it's the racetrack.
Prepare. Get revved up and before you hit that gas pedal. But basically, in step 1 here, we show business continuity and disaster recovery planning is key, right? The planning is the beginning. You don't start planning after an incident or an event. You really want to plan way ahead, get everybody on board, turn it into a culture shift. That's one of the things that we've done is really won the crowd, I guess you could say, when it came to planning and stuff like that, even with incident response and walking through that with ransomware readiness tabletops, planning around that. Of course, see it, solve it for inventory, and so on. That playbook development is key. As a strategic partner, we help with that playbook as well. And of course, we leverage immutability in the planning process to ensure that things are intact and not able to be destroyed per se by a threat actor or manipulated from a data protection standpoint, or even human error, or even insider threat, right? There's other things that you can look at from that perspective as well, especially the air gapping. Air gapping is a huge, I would say, capability that allows you to not overwrite your current production systems, essentially, but also give you the capabilities that Jeff had mentioned before. Yeah, Jeff, I mean, you named them off. I mean, there was quite a few things: forensics, testing, multi-dimensional backups running at the same time through streams, like you mentioned before, so that you can pick and choose what you need from a multi-dimensional recovery that you typically see from a ransomware attack. And of course, pressure testing. Put the pressure on. Hit the pedal to the metal when it comes to pressure testing your recovery plans and testing those and actually seeing them in action. The beauty of seeing them in action in real time with the console is pretty straightforward and crisp, and it gives you a really good idea of the capability that you now have to say, okay, we can now really relay back to key shareholders and leadership of what's going on in real time on every single restore that we're doing, essentially, in recovery capability around that. And then, of course, once you get it in place and as it streams through, scanning is starting to happen. We're looking for threats, we're looking for vulnerabilities, we're looking for exploits and things like that that would come into play potentially, or even potential payloads that may still be there even past a certain dwell time. So those are some of the key things that we really are interested in. And of course, Jeff, recovery is key there, right? So, you might
Yep.
want to,
I mean, we
yeah,
really hit it earlier, but I mean, just to reiterate, recovery process is key. And having that alternate site that you can fail into is important. You might not have the hardware, the infrastructure might be it might be police taped off. You actually can't access your environment. So you absolutely need an alternate site to recover into. You also need something like most clients today have a foot out in like Azure or AWS or GCP. So you need a spot that actually has that type of connectivity that can reach out and extend your networks out to, whatever scenario you're leveraging the cloud for as well. And so we can provide that capability in addition to the physical infrastructure. And then of course the automation and managed orchestration is where things get advanced. It really is going to boost your capabilities for recovering your systems, and it's going to build that confidence that your teams want, that they need to be able to say, yeah, we've tested and we're very confident in our abilities to be able to recover the business from an attack or whatever the disaster scenario might be. And a lot of
yeah,
things that a lot of times it's put on the back burner, forgotten, but the remediation and like the failback scenarios need to be planned for. So having somebody that's been there and able to walk you through what is possible and maybe what's the best approach for your business, is important as well. Because it's not always easy to fail back home, or you maybe need to go back to an alternate site. So having that kind of planning and capability is important as well.
absolutely. And the beauty of it is, in the midst of these curves, you know who's driving as well. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have identified throughout the process. And so when you look at what we have to offer now today, we have what's called ransomware recovery as a service, right? And this is a solution of components that we've brought together that we've learned through the years, through all the testing and things that we've done in the past with our clients, and lessons learned, right? Of the remediation piece that Jeff was recently talking about, of some of the things that we can really bring to the table strategically to our future clients and current clients as well. as strategic partners. And when you look at the things that we bring to the table here, it's the ransomware readiness gap assessment. That's just a small assessment, just to start out to get an understanding and ascertain where do you line up with ransomware recovery, and how does that fit into your organization today from a ransomware slant, right? And then of course when you tie in the other things as well around some of that, like vulnerability scanning and remediation, business continuity and DR planning, and looking at those things really come into play, especially with immutability. Immutability is huge when we're looking at ransomware recovery scenarios. And Jeff, I mean, you can speak to the other stuff too. I mean, like the hot site failover with clean room, that is a major capability that we provide as well, and some of the others here
Right.
that kind of run through as well. Feel
Yep.
free.
Yeah. I mean, again, like hot site failover, clean room capabilities is really part of the ransomware recovery as a service package. And you need that alternate site, a way to scan your backups, make sure preemptively make sure that they're clean. And of course, testing and validation, runbook management, automation, and orchestration are all components that we can bring to the table to make sure that we can cycle through testing and make sure that that you're recoverable.
And all of these things can be not thrown at you at once, essentially. I mean, it can be done in sort of stages, I guess. What do you think, Jeff? I mean, what would be some of the key stages you would start with to really kind of build the foundation?
Well, if I'm picking and choosing, I would say make sure that you've got immutable backups and that you're testing that you can recover. Have that good plan and test it as
Yeah,
frequently as possible. Like that Polaroid snapshot once a year is not going to get it done really. You're by the 11th month you've got too many changes in your environment.
absolutely. So as you can see, this is a cohesive ecosystem that we've built for our clients and future clients and partners to really show that as it encompasses and matures, it helps much more on the foundational level of key areas that will help protect your organization.
So Scott, we've got a quick QR code.
Yes. So here, folks, is a QR code. It's valid. Don't worry. It's valid. I've validated it myself. But no, it's definitely valid. It's a QR code to kind of get you scheduled for a free ransomware readiness discovery session. That's a tongue twister right there. But basically, what we'll do is we'll sit down with you, kind of walk through this. It's very straightforward, only takes a few minutes, and it's not too invasive. It's not like you need an NDA or anything like that, but it's very, very crisp and to the point, and it's thought provoking as well. So it works out very well. And some of the top 5 questions that you're going to see here are third party risk. Is there a program in place? Supply chain. There's a lot of stuff going on right now around NIST 853 around supply chain now. And of course, again, as we talked before, business continuity, disaster recovery planning, do you have multi-factor authentication? Sometimes you'll get that question around cyber insurance as well. Sometimes you can't even get written for cyber insurance unless you have multi-factor authentication, what's known as MFA. And do you, again, the last one there, Jeff, I mean, what do you think about that one? I think we've talked about
Immutable
that one before.
backups.
Yeah.
I don't think we've mentioned that today.
All right. Yeah.
Yes.
So wait, what?
All right. I
But
hope you
yeah.
do. So Scott, that wraps it up. I think we'll take some questions if we have any. Back to you, Bob.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jeff and Scott. And if you do have any questions for Jeff and Scott here, again, utilize the question panel you'll locate on the right-hand side of your screen. We've got several here that have come in, so let's jump right in this. How do organizations prioritize their response efforts following a ransomware attack, especially when dealing with data loss, system downtime, and financial implications?
How do we prioritize?
How do we prioritize? Yeah. So prioritization around that would be revenue driven, right? How does it affect your revenue and how does it affect your payroll, essentially? Because it could be your payroll systems that are down. People still need to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
People still need to interact with customers and maintain the high level of service availability. Anything that's service availability that can end up tarnishing the reputation of the organization is key. That's where you really want to start. And then prioritize your incident response and your partners that you deal with incident response and the partners that you deal with recovery. Even if you suspect there might be ransomware involved in your organization, definitely declare as soon as you can an attack and try to get the declaration to start your business continuity and disaster recovery planning capability immediately with your partner if you have a partner involved. So those are key priorities. And then, of course, work with your other C-levels if you can, or finance leaders, especially around the cyber insurance piece, if they handle that, and really get that lined up along with your incident response provider, and then really make sure that you want to focus on your backup systems as well. So the high priority is to make sure that you get everything established there. If you're down to bare metal and you need connectivity back to your vendors, you got to prioritize that as well. Get your vendors lined up and so on. So that's probably the major priorities you want to focus on.
It's a good point. You might have a third-party dependency that you're not even aware of. That payer system through
Yeah,
the healthcare system kind of
absolutely,
scenario.
absolutely. That
All
could be a
right.
part of tabletop too. Yeah.
All right, here's a question that came in earlier when you're talking about RTO. Is analysis and forensic time frame included in or part of the RTO considerations?
So that's going to be more of an art form. It's you can say yes, I'm able to recover XYZ systems in an X amount of time just through testing. But where you're not quite certain, where it's kind of an X factor as far as how much time is it going to take to do an analysis, forensics analysis and sanitizing, is really you're going to get a sense of how long it could take based on your testing cycles. So if you do like a tabletop exercise and you set the bar at, okay, I'm going to run a forensics analysis on these 50 VMs, and I'm going to do 3 different restore points for each one of those. So it's 150 VMs that I'm really running actions on. If you run through that kind of test scenario, that's going to give you a sense of how much time it's really going to take from an RTO perspective.
Absolutely. And when you and Jeff, what about the multi-streaming capability? Do you think that comes into play here as well, where you would
Yeah, absolutely.
stream out to
Yeah.
just do forensics and save time?
Yes. Yeah. You can kind of do the math based on that. You say, okay, I'm restoring 50 systems. I have to run forensics analysis. Maybe it takes, I don't know, 30 minutes per system, right? So you can kind of put that into the calculations and then expand that out based on, I'm going to run that for across 3 different restore points, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month out.
Yeah.
So it's really, just the amount of time I can move that data from a backup to the restored target. The forensics teams runs the analysis. Communications have to occur across the board, and so that's really where you'll get a sense of what your true RTO is. Now, of
And then you can
course,
also clean room that too, right? So you can have a separate entity just for forensics running, and then the forensics teams can just handle that, the attorneys and what have you, and while you're still running the other systems, getting those online.
multi-stream process,
Yeah.
and that's, of course, that's where we can really come in and really help you out. Is if we design the DR plan for you with even that, like a clean room multi analysis approach, we can automate all of that and kind of show you cycling through what it might look like from a test or a true DR perspective.
Very cool.
All right, how does Recovery Point ensure seamless integration of legacy systems with modern cloud-based solutions when developing a data protection and disaster recovery plan while maintaining compliance and minimizing disruption during transition?
Wow. So the legacy systems and cloud systems, I think I caught the question was, how do you maintain consistency and compliance? So that's part of the DR plan. And the disaster recovery is becoming more complicated every day because clients are moving workloads out to the cloud. And it's not just EC2 instances, they're building out dependencies on services that these cloud operators are supplying to you as well. So you have to start to look at, ask them, how, what's what's DR for, a cloud service? How do I know that that's going to be there for me? And you've seen in the headlines, there's been major outages with cloud providers too. That's going to happen. So you have to be prepared. It might today it's not super great. I mean, you can do replication from region 1 to region 2. It's going to give you a bit of a high availability, but after that, it's really snapshot based restoration processes, or those snapshots become cold storage backups. So the recovery time starts to get longer and longer because you're pulling from cheaper storage, basically. So that's part of the DR plan in today's world. You're going to have some on-prem systems, legacy stuff that's still in your data center that has to stay there for whatever reason. That has to be recovered, but that has to be able to connect to the cloud too, communicate back to the cloud, and the cloud has to be able to be in sync with whatever the legacy system's dependent on.
Yeah, that also includes compliance systems that are running like maybe like your SIM, for security and incident event management that'll constantly run even in recovery mode. So those are some of the things that you can look into as well, and you're just ensuring that scans are taking place. We have the scanning capabilities as well, so to help maintain that level of compliance of data and integrity.
All right. Given the increasing sophistication of ransomware attacks, how does Recovery Point's recovery or ransomware as a service solution differentiate itself from traditional cybersecurity providers in terms of its focus on recovery orchestration?
Sure. So I'll take a part of this, Jeff, and if you want to take another part too. So we'll take this in two parts. One part being the cyber piece, and then the part being the recovery piece. So from a cyber perspective, basically you would have like an instant response team that would come in, right? And we would partner with them to basically get up. They would taxi us up to the runway, and then from there we would do the recovery. But getting up to that point is where we partner, with the client to be like, okay, this is not just a tactical operation. This is a planning operation. This is a long-term engagement. It can be broken down into short-term milestones. Absolutely, yes. Modularized, not a problem. But overall, the cohesive ecosystem when it comes together is basically a plan that you're going to build strategically within your organization, and also with us, so that we can really get a better understanding of how your organization functions. And that ties back to the business continuity, understanding the functions and the business impact and systems impact and all the other things, and then building that into the DR plan that Jeff had mentioned earlier in another question. And then once you have all that in place, and the systems are identified and they're being scanned, and things like that, then you can basically shift over to more of the long-term planning that will help the organization build upon the foundational techniques that we've mentioned in previous slides here. And Jeff, if you want to add on to that, feel free.
Yeah, yeah. Just real quick. I mean, cybersecurity firms, they don't take into consideration recovery. They come in to do tactical, like you said, to provide the upfront protection, scanning, detection capabilities, and then the IR teams, they come in to stop the bleeding. But none of those firms are looking at the recoverability, or they just don't have that kind of offering in place. They're coming in from a early stage perspective, but
Right.
nobody's, that's where we would come in to provide the recovery services.
Yeah, the Mandiants of the world, the Unit 42s of the world, the first question they're going to ask is, where are your backup systems and platforms and recovery capabilities?
All right, wonderful. That wraps us up with the Q&A here. We're at the top of the hour. So any parting words here today, Jeff or Scott?
Just thank you for the opportunity to present today. Appreciate your
Absolutely,
time.
Jeff. Thank you for your time, everybody. We greatly appreciate it. Take care.
All right, wonderful. Thanks again, everyone, for your attendance today. Hope you gather some great information from today's webinar. It's also very timely with the start of Cybersecurity Awareness Month here in October. So I'd like to personally thank Scott and Jeff for their time here today, as well as Recovery Point for sponsoring today's webinar. We will be emailing everyone a link to the recording. You may view that recording as often as you like or share it with your peers. If you have any additional questions, please contact Disaster Cover Journal. Thank you again, and this now ends today's webinar. Thanks, everyone.